me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart. I will enter his courts with praise. I will say, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad.
Okay, well, good evening. Brother Suresh is in Michigan, as I understand it. He's asked me to go ahead and finish the chapter because he may be gone for the next 2 weeks anyway. And so we're going to be looking at the last chapter, chapter 13. I'd ask you to turn to page 130, or 120 rather, in the book. And our present study, our present chapter, is entitled, What Will Hell Be Like? And we're in part 2 of that discussion. And last time we considered 2 descriptions that our author provides, and they're points 1 and 2 on this particular page. He says hell is a place of flaming fire, and hell is a place of unquenchable thirst. Undoubtedly, Jesus used the worst description that humans are capable of understanding for their permanent spiritual isolation from God for all eternity. There's just nothing that we experience in this life that compares to what hell is like. You start asking about fire, what temperature is the fire and all that. Is it white fire, blue fire, yellow? I don't think that this is really referring to fire at all, but it's the worst situation that we can ever imagine to be in. Hell is described as a place of no hope and of no escape. We also consider the possibility that the intensity of eternal punishment will not be the same for all people. And we studied a little bit from Luke chapter 12, where there is a discussion of punishment, the difference between receiving few stripes and receiving many stripes. Once again, this is not referring to fire, but this time it's referring to a beating, or we used the word flogging last time. And we see that in Luke 12, verses 47 and 48. And yet, since no one living on earth ever experienced total separation from God except for Jesus, while he was on the cross bearing the sins of the world, we simply cannot imagine what eternal separation from God is like. And so that's why we have these types of descriptions that are given to us. That seems to be the sum of all descriptions of hell. Remember, we considered last time that even in this life, God is kind to the wicked. They receive the same sunshine and so on, and rain that we receive. But in hell, nobody receives those benefits. I know that we would be preferring to be talking about the joy of heaven. I know I would be. Hell is something that we really don't want to think about. Well, what do you see to be the greatest enjoyment that any of us could ever imagine experiencing in heaven? What is the greatest joy that you can imagine? What makes heaven so beautiful to you? Yes. Yes, being in the presence of Jesus, being in the presence of deity. Absolutely. Yes, brother? Well, peace is good. Yes, I imagine that would be wonderful as well. And in fact, we're going to be talking about some other things that are not in heaven, that are in hell. And one of the reasons why we would not want to be there. Yes, Brother Bergstrom.
Well, if God can't look upon sin, but we're going to be directly in fellowship with God in heaven, ergo there's no sin in heaven.
That's right.
So everything else comes along with it, being in the presence of Jesus. Peace, of course, being one of them. So we are getting what our heart's desire is as a Christian who wants their Lord's will to be done.
Yes. Everything comes with it. And you say, well, I can't imagine anybody going to hell. How can an all-good God send people to hell? Well, people make that decision themselves, whether they seek after God or they do not seek after God. It's not so much, sending somebody to hell as it is, that is the choice that they have made. They have not desired that fellowship with God. And so the greatest thing that we can ever imagine being in the very presence of God apart from sin. If sin were allowed to be present in heaven, heaven would not be heaven, would it? Yes. So why would we be there? It's certainly not because we deserve to be there. It's always by the grace of God, isn't it? But we'll be in a place where there's no temptation. And it is a place that we have already proven ourselves to choose God over sin. Again, it's not that we are perfect in this matter, because we're not. Well, yeah, all of our wants and needs would be taken care of. The main thing, as Sister Jennifer pointed out, is that we are in the presence of God. I want to be with God. It's not so much that I don't want to go to hell. Of course, I don't want to go to hell. But the reason I don't want to go to hell, the main reason being, is God won't be there. And the whole idea is to be with God. Let's begin our study this evening by reading from Revelation 21, 1 through 8. We see a contrast here, and when we come down to verse 8, we come to understand who's in hell. And it's one of many descriptions like this of the lost. Again, that's Revelation chapter 21, beginning with verse 1. The text reads, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, 'Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men.'" So here we are with God. "And he will dwell with them." Here we see the emphasis of what we've been talking about this evening. Being with God. We are dwelling with God, God is dwelling with us, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said to me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of water of life freely to him who thirsts. Notice the contrast that we see with the rich man in Luke 16. He's in a place where he thirsts, and that thirst cannot be satisfied. So verse 7 continues, He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. Now look at the contrast in the next verse. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. That is a place where I do not desire to go, right there. And I trust you don't either. So let's go ahead and look at our class book this evening. We're starting with number 3 on page 120. Our author says, hell is populated with the most deeply depraved of mankind. Men with the character of Dives are there. Who is Dives? Never heard of Dives? Have you heard of Dives? Who do you think Dives is? Hey, don't feel bad. I grew up not knowing who Dives was. Democrat. We need to turn the camera over this way, man. No. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, Dives is the name that is given to the rich man of Luke 16, the rich man and Lazarus. Oh, huh? Well, that's the whole point. You look at Luke chapter 16, Lazarus is named, but not the rich man. So where did the name come from? It is the Latin for rich man. Dives is. And I thought it was rather interesting that our author, I knew him quite well, that would even mention Dives, because that name is not found in Scripture. And I thought, now that's interesting. Well, he says, think, eternity with the miserly, merciless, covetous, and greedy, yes, and forever and ever. Hell is devoid of the friendship, of the sweet presence of the best on earth, of the Lazaruses, the Abrahams, the Johns, the Pauls, etc. And when you read Matthew 8 and verse 11, Jesus talking about sitting down in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's why we have that. The following text, to hear hell's roll call, read the following text. And we already read from Revelation chapter 21 and verse 8. When I was reading this, I thought how foolish it is to listen to people sometimes talking about obeying the gospel, and they won't obey the gospel because they feel like some way, some corrupt thinking in their mind that their mother, maybe their grandfather or grandmother did not obey the gospel. And therefore they went to hell, is their judgment. I don't pass judgment. That's not my place to pass judgment. And it says, if grandma is not there, then I don't want to be there. Now, it's usually grandma because grandma has already passed into eternity. And so you're with grandma in your own mind. And with whom else are you with for eternity? You're in the presence of the most wicked men and women who ever lived. And it's going to be worse for you, really. Maybe grandma didn't have an opportunity. Maybe nobody shared the gospel with grandma. But you heard the gospel. Why do I say that? Let's go back and look at Luke chapter 12. Keep your finger here in Revelation 21. But look at Luke chapter 12, where we talked about few and many stripes. And this is really worthy of our consideration this evening. Verse 41, then Peter said to him, Lord, do you speak this parable only to us or to all the people? So Jesus has just delivered the parable about keeping the lamps burning and so on. And the Lord said, who then is that faithful and wise servant whom the master will make rule over his household to give them their portion of food in due season? Blessed is that man whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will make him rule over all he has. But if that servant says into his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat the male and female servants, and to eat and drink and be drunk, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and an hour which he is not aware, and will cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. And that servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare himself or do according to his will be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few stripes. For everyone to whom much is given, from him will much be required, and to him much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. Yes.
So it sounds like we ought to be pitying our fallen brothers and sisters the most of anyone else.
That's right. Brother Bergstrom says we ought to be pitying our fallen brothers and sisters in Christ, because they know the truth. At one time they obeyed the truth, and they went back to the world. You know, people used to ask, you know, what about those people in third world countries and that type of thing? And my attitude is, you're concerned about them? I think you should be more concerned about yourself. You know, they had an opportunity. You know, the gospel went into all the world. And this comes as a failure from parents, of parents not teaching their children. Now, parents can teach their children, and the children are always free to decide for themselves. You can't put all this on the parents, but the parents have the responsibility to teach their children. And the children can either obey the gospel or walk away from it. It all depends upon their heart. Some people seek after God. Some people do not seek after God. Over the years, and I don't want to get off on this because I don't want to stay on this chapter forever. But over the years, I've had a little bit different thinking concerning trying to develop interest in people to want to know Christ. A lot of times we make enemies of people. If a person clearly tells you that they're not interested in God, they're not seeking after God, don't start talking to them about God. Don't put the guilt trip upon them. It's not going to work. In fact, most likely it will harden them. Well, people say, well, now you're just giving up. No, we haven't given up. But sometimes people's hearts change. Unfortunately, it usually takes some sort of tragedy in life to wake people up and realize that the reason why they're here is because their Creator created them to His glory, and that someday we will have to answer to God. But people don't think that way. So if I see interest, then let's talk about God. But if there's no interest, sometimes you drop a little seed and so on, and interest, they may come around. But remember, even giving the Great Commission, the idea was that they were to teach all the nations. People all over the world as it was then, had an opportunity to hear the gospel. They can either accept it or reject it. Some people are seeking after God, some people are not. Most people are not, it seems like. So these things can change. Yes, Brother Brad?
I think it's kind of fascinating because it basically is calling out the life of a Christian as a paradox. Because a Christian's life is should be serving, caring for others, putting other people first. But on the flip side, it is a very selfish point because we have to consider our own salvation first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
We can't let our salvation depend on anyone else.
That's right.
So like I said, it's an interesting paradox.
Yeah, it is a paradox because we can't allow, as you said, we cannot allow our salvation to depend upon somebody else. If a person's going to come to Christ, that has to be their decision. You don't compromise with them. You don't stand in the way. You feel like that gives you maybe some sort of power or you're converting somebody. No. God will give the increase. So this has to do with their relationship with God. And there's one thing I don't want to do is stand in between. I don't want to hinder that. Let's keep that in mind. Let's go back to our reading here concerning these various passages. Galatians 5:19 through 21. Of course, those are the works of the flesh. 1 Corinthians 6, verses 9 and 10. That has to do with sexual immorality, fornication. You have Matthew 25 and verse 41, where we have the discussion of the devil and his angels. And so the author says, suppose we could arrange for every thief, liar, murderer, sodomite, prostitute, gambler, blasphemer, idolater, sorcerer, extortioner, drunkard, addict, hater of God, and braggart to be put into one city. In other words, suppose we could empty every prison, gambling den, house of sodomy, and prostitution, yea, hell with the devil and his angels. and put them into one city all alone. Would you want to build your dream cottage there and settle down for life? No. But brethren, I see it much worse than that. You could put them all in one city here on earth, and they are still living under the care of God. But when you're talking about hell, you're talking about a place of isolation, sent away from the very presence of God. And there are some other words that describe this, such as light and darkness and all that type of thing, which we'll come into. If we couldn't experience some measure of goodness somewhere in this life, life would be unbearable, wouldn't it? Well, that's a description of hell. There is no measure of goodness there. The fourth place, our author says, hell is a place afar off, a place of separation from God. And again, that takes us back to the rich man and Lazarus. The sinner is now estranged, afar off. Remember, the Gentiles are described as that in Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 13. Alienated from the commonwealth of Israel and so on. But they were in the world. Luke 15 and verse 13, what do you suppose that's referring to? The prodigal son, and where did he go? Far off. Yeah. Isaiah 59 verses 1 and 2. Your sins have separated yourself from God so that he does not hear. And take a look at, here's a passage that we don't usually consider, Proverbs 15:29. I mean, you talk about a statement that is very direct. This is it. Again, we're looking at Proverbs 15. It's not very long, but it says it all as far as I'm concerned. Get over there eventually. The Lord is far from the wicked, but hears the prayer of the righteous. It goes so well with Isaiah 59 verses 1 and 2. God does not hear the prayer of the wicked. Why do you suppose God does not hear the prayer of the wicked? Because it's separated from him. Brother, he said, Brother Vigatora says, not sincere. Why doesn't God hear the prayer of the wicked? Whole point is, you don't hear God, God doesn't hear you. So what could you say to God? What could you ask of God when you're deliberately living contrary to his will? You say, well, you could say, well, I'd like to be saved. Now you're not talking about the wicked anymore, are you? So the idea is that if you hear me, I will hear you. And all sinners will remain eternally separated from God in hell. 2 Thessalonians 1, remember, he's coming and rendering vengeance to them who know not God. And Matthew 5:32, where you have the parable of the sheep and the goats, and they're being separated. Yet presently the living wicked are not totally separated from God and his benefits. Again, we read that in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 45. But eternally, the damned are totally separated. So hell is really spoken of as a second death. What would be the first death, generally, as we talk about it? Yes, physical death. And the second death would be spiritual. Well, we have spiritual death here, but it'd be separation. Death means separation, doesn't it? So there you'd be permanently separated from God. Physical death is separation of what? Body and spirit, thank you. The second death is separation of what? Yes, from God. Eternal separation. And because hell is far off from God, it is spoken of, and look at the words that he uses here, and I think this is very good words to remember. It's a place of darkness because God is the source of light. Which we know from 1 John 1 and verse 5, God is light and there is no darkness in him at all. It's a place of death since God is the source of life. We already read that from Revelation 21 and verse 8. Romans 6 and verse 23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You have John 5 and verse 26. And a place of misery since God is the source of all comfort. Revelation 20 and verse 10. We read of the wonderful comfort of heaven. And he is the God of comfort in 2 Corinthians 1 and verse 3. Yea, hell is God forsaken. Again, we can't imagine, since we've never experienced anything like that, that type of separation where there is no presence of God in our being. You know, you can talk about the fire and all this and the brimstone, and I would, if that were literally true, I said, boy, that's terrible. But there's something worse than that, and that's being separated from God eternally. You know, a lot of people won't do anything about it. They live their lives knowing this, but not really appreciating how badly things are for them. And hell is a place of separation from our loved ones. People say, well, I couldn't be happy in heaven knowing my relatives or spouse or whatever is in hell. Remember the story of the rich man and Lazarus? Could the rich man see Lazarus? Is there any mention of Lazarus seeing the rich man? See, God wipes away all tears, doesn't he? So the Bible is very consistent about these things. He wants Lazarus to come and help him, correct? And he's talking to Father Abraham. And, of course, Abraham is a place of comfort, too. Well, it's really, there are some things for us to think about very, very seriously. Number 5. Once again, I'm not trying to prolong this, but we need to get a little bit deeper appreciation than just reading through the text and answering questions. Just to answer the questions would take one class period, wouldn't it? More than that. We want to really consider what is prepared, what's prepared for us. Hell is a place of unrelieved pain. Pain is expressed in different ways. We see that with the rich man and Lazarus in Luke 16. What was the rich man's only request? Not his only, what was his first request? Yeah, a drop of water. Just think of it. If he's in a place that we're talking about literal fire, and we're talking about literal physical thirst, how much relief would one drop of water render? Why is it said that way?
To show how awful
Yeah,
that place is.
that's right. He's desperate, isn't he?
Even one drop would be really
Yeah. Just some relief, some hope. But that's not there. Where such a small thing is considered of great relief, we have an indication of the intensity of the pain and misery. And the author goes on to say, in hell men suffer 1,000,000 deaths a second. Seconds will seem like millenniums and so on. Well, he's expounding upon this himself. Yet, there is consciousness in hell. A lot of people say, well, I don't believe in hell. I think when you die, like Rover, you die all over. That there's just no more consciousness after death. But according to Luke 16, when they're talking about the rich man, what's his name? Dives. In hell, men see, verse 23, they feel, verse 24, they talk, verse 24, they reason, verse 30, they remember, verse 25. Ooh. Just think of how terrible it would be to remember in hell. Why would I say that? Why would just remembering be torture?
You can see how far he fell.
You see how far he fell? That's right.
Because that happens now, right? You don't think about a time when something was really great and it makes you feel bad now. Can you imagine what it would be like in hell? That would be like multiplied a million.
Very good. Yes.
knowing what you've lost.
Okay. What word am I looking for here? It starts with an R. Regret. I could have, but I didn't. Just saying that all through eternity. Just beating yourself up for that. I had the opportunity, but I did nothing with it. Notice these descriptions of hell pointing up the fact that it's a place of unrelieved pain, tormented day and night, forever and ever. When I look at this, I'm not seeing God's standing there and pushing buttons. I'll give them electric shock now, or I'll send a flame, to make them jump, or I don't see any of that in this. Rather, what do we see?
pure separation.
The whole thing has to do with the separation from God. little ones sometimes feel really terrified, separated from their mother for a little while. They're just terrified. They'll scream. But can you imagine being separated eternally? I'm told that, like in Romania, I was reading many years ago, so many children left orphaned, and hundreds of beds and little children, babies put in there because their mother and father are dead, and there's nobody to hold them. In fact, in some hospitals, they have hired women to come and just hold babies. Just to have that contact. Because it's reported that if they don't receive that type of contact, if they're not held, what happens? They'll die. They'll die. That's why the separation is the worst. Even in prisons, First of all, you're put in prison, you're separated from the rest of society, and if you really get bad, you're put in isolated confinement. And people are trying to keep their sanity. So it's tormented day and night forever. It's described as punishment, as tribulation and anguish, Romans 2:8-9. It's a place of no rest. Even the sick, if they're hurting and so on, can be put out. Sometimes they put them in a coma, or at least they fall asleep. If they're for operation, they're out, aren't they? So they don't feel the knife. But you don't have that here. But we're told in heaven, Revelation 21, verse 4, there is no pain. Brethren, we really need to give strong consideration of these of this chapter, these points. I don't want to become a Christian simply because I don't want to go to hell. I want to be a Christian because I want to have fellowship with God. I want to be with God now and in all eternity. I never want to be separated from God. Yes, Brother Bergson.
It's interesting, the whole point about there being no pain, it doesn't explain that it's no physical or spiritual / emotional. Personally, I can endure physical pain if I'm without, if I know I wouldn't have emotional or spiritual pain to go along with it.
And you can tolerate pain for a while because you have hope that it will be over. Sometimes people with bad diseases and so on pray to die just to get relief from the pain. But let's end on a happy note. Our desire is to be with God eternally, where there is no pain, there is no separation, where there's no darkness, because we'll be in the very presence of God eternally. Brethren, that ought to be our life's ambition. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Our time is gone this evening, and we'll go off YouTube and we'll enter into our prayer session. Thank you.